It could be from May 10th to the 28th. So it's like 2.5 weeks. But you'd really need 3 weeks total. And I know for Americans with work, sometimes you don't get that much time off unless you're retired or something. And you need really about 3 weeks. If you have a little bit more time, even better. But the trip was about 2.5 weeks.
You can't all go on the way for 2.5
Well,
weeks?
there's lodges. There's many, many lodges, and it can be crowded as well. But later May it'll be less crowded. So there's lodges, and everything's taken care of. Everything's booked in advance. There's guides with us. We know where we're stopping for lunch and where we're, and almost all the meals are taken care of or included. So it's all pretty much set up. And you can ask Lisa too what was her experience if you want, like that. So yeah, so that would all be set like that. Thank you. So thank you very much for coming. I know there might be some people straggling in. And this has been all too short of a visit here. I've really enjoyed being back and seeing some friends and things like that. It's been wonderful. So I was talking to Nicole. There might be a chance I can come in the summer for a week or something. So hoping to do that maybe July, something like that. We'll see. That would be great. So this is an evening on coping with anxiety and depression. Is that right? That's the topic tonight? Okay. So I'm glad you turned up, because sometimes it seems a bit of a downer, talking about anxiety and depression. But what I've found is Tibetan Buddhism, I find to be one of the more significant paths, more effective paths in dealing with disturbing mind states, especially anxiety and depression. And so I'm part of the bigger organization that Thupten Khunga Center is a member of, is part of, the FPMT, Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition. And so on our website, on the FPMT website, not my individual website, but it's connected to a whole range of teachings that Rinpoche's given, and there's a lot on depression. He has a lot on, because so many people suffer from depression, many students, and so I brought a little bit of that I have, and so I'll read some snippets from that, like that. So, I don't know, do we need an introduction? My name's Amy Miller. We're gonna get together tonight, but I think it's okay. Nothing too interesting in the bio, so you can ask me anything anyway if you want about my life, like that. So what I'd like to do first, we haven't done this over the weekend, but we have set motivations. But Saturday we were doing more, like a little bit more meditation, talking about that. And yesterday was quite short. So what I'd like to do is, it's often we recite some prayers before there's a teaching. So I thought that would be nice as well. And they're in this gold book, which I think some of you have, or you could pass around. Oh wait, we also have prayers before the teachings. So we're going to turn to page 98, Refuge and Bodhicitta before the teaching. Page 98, that last paragraph. And what's important is to first think about why you're here and what's your purpose for being here. And most probably, a number of you are focused on, well, what does she have to say about coping with anxiety and depression? And we all have gone through spaces of that, of having some anxiety at times or feeling down. And some people have it in extreme ways. So we're all in a different range, but certainly there's some interest in that. And so you might also include that I'm interested in that, but can that also help my mind? That would be great. And if my mind is clearer and more balanced, then I might be more spacious to think of others more than myself. Because usually with anxiety and depression, it's a lot about me. But I might be able to expand my view and be more present and available to help others. And that's a path that can get you enlightened. And if you're enlightened, if you become a Buddha, which simply means fully awakened being in Sanskrit, from that state you're unlimited in helping all living beings. So if you want to expand a little bit more of that motivation, that's really on this tradition why we're here tonight, why we want to come to teachings, listen to teachings, why I want to meditate, why I want to have a meditation practice, why I want to read this Dharma book or study this. So in our tradition, it's all focused on reaching a place where I can then unlimitedly, perfectly help all living beings. So it's with that kind of motivation in mind. You may have a different motivation, but just take a moment, close your eyes, and just conjure up. Think of your motivation. And if you feel to align it with the motivation I was just speaking of, feel free. But really directing your awareness in a most positive way. Please set a positive, a good, establish a good motivation for our time together right now and any activities of the rest of your day. And then on page 98, we will read the Refuge in Bodhicitta before the teaching. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. We're going to chant it twice in the phonetics. O Sangye Chodanzo Kichon Namla Chanchu Badu Dagi Kyapsuchi Dagi Chenyengi Peso Namki Jola Penchu Sangye Druparsho Sangye Chodanzo Kichon Namla Chanchu Badu Dagi Kyapsuchi Dagi Chenyengi Peso Namki Jola Penchu Sangye Druparsho. So I'll tell you a secret. It's not really a secret, but if you look at the Taking Refuge and Generating Bodhicitta prayer on page 34 in the Gold Book, and if you look at the one on page 98, so the one on page 34 is a general one you can do in your own practice, and some of you've taken refuge, and that's a requirement often to recite that verse on page 34, those 4 lines, in English or Tibetan, it doesn't matter, 3 times in the morning, 3 times at night, to remind yourself of what you've taken refuge in. Kind of keep that fresh in the mind, okay? But before teaching, we recite the one on page 98, because the only difference in the prayers is the 3rd line. So if you see in the English, before the teachings, I'm saying by the merits I create through listening to the Dharma. And in my own practice, by my practice of giving and other perfections. So where it changes is chiningi, as opposed to jinsogi, like that. So just a slight difference. So it's those of you that are newer, now you kind of know something. And it's kind of cool, because I've been at teachings, and when I didn't know, and they'd be like big teachings with the Dalai Lama, or we'd be in India, and everybody'd be, Zangye Jodan, Zangye Jodan, you hear everybody chanting. I mean, there's a lot of people there, many monks and nuns, but lay people as well, and you'd hear people, and then you can tell that before the teaching, the new people were saying Jinsogi Pe. They didn't know before the teachings. you know. And then you'd get a student who'd be around like 3 years, and now they know, and then they'd say to one of the new people, no, it's Chinengi. It's Chinengi for the teaching. Like, and all of a sudden, they're like, it's exciting, you know something. But it's nice to know that, you know, because you don't know, and then you'll hear different things, and you realize it's actually, but some people forget, so they just say the one. So those are just slight distinction in that very special prayer. And I believe FPMT, we have these wonderful online courses, and there's some snippets now of some little areas. Like if you don't have time to do a whole course, you can check out something shorter, and they have some of Rinpoche teaching something and an explanation. And so I think they have one on this prayer, just on this prayer like that they put on, something like that. Great, thank you. Then there's more preliminary prayers you can do, as you know, but it's nice to have something. Okay. Disturbing emotions, particularly anxiety and depression, we're going to focus on this evening. And the first thing I would say in general, if you suffer from chronic anxiety and depression, but any of us, we've all been through these mind states. We're all pretty much the same that way. I know that some people we all have different delusions that are operating, and there's many. When I say delusion, in Sanskrit, klesha, Tibetan nyomo, what I mean is when my mind is off balance. I'm not saying you're crazy. I'm not a crazy person. I'm not any crazier than anybody else, right? But sometimes I have anger in my mind. Sometimes I have fear in my mind, attachment. Some people suffer from pride and jealousy, anxiety, depression, forgetfulness, laziness. These are all imbalances of the mind, and these situations are not innate with your mind. So that means they can be eliminated from your mind permanently, if you're interested in that. So when I just mentioned a few of these, and there's many, they molt into many more delusions as well, but some started to jump up for you, like, you know, that's mine. You know, some of us are arrogant, some of us have very low self-esteem that people think is okay, that's not the bad side of my ego. But having low self-esteem is the same device of the ego as being an egomaniac. Just a slightly different expression of it, but it's the same. If you feel that you're that much worse than everyone else and carry yourself that way, that's also a problem with the ego that's not balanced. As opposed to having healthy self-esteem, where you understand your faults, your mistakes, you accept, you're working on them, and you're doing the best you can. Positive, bright. Understand? Make sense? Okay.
Absolutely.
So we have all these things operating. So the best thing is first for you to identify your biggest delusions. For some people, it's attachment and grasping and desire. They're consumed with it. For other people, it's anger, and they get irritated and annoyed and frustrated really easily. And so identify the first thing that's going on, the main one, and you go after that first and you work on that. Okay. But tonight we're going to talk specifically more about fear, anxiety, depression, and things like that. What I wanted to talk about are general ways we can deal with them. General ways we can deal with anxiety and depression. One of the main things, and one thing that we also, in Buddhism, we do not suppress emotions necessarily. If I find a delusion coming up in my mind that may create an emotional experience, I'm not going to deny it. I'm not angry. No, I didn't need the extra shoes that I bought. I really didn't want them. I knew I had to get the 2 pairs, but you're not denying that if you want something, we're not suppressing it. You're kind of acknowledging when the delusion arises, and then we're applying antidotes that apply to various delusions, and there are different ones. So slowly over your Dharma career, you want to slowly learn, this is more focused on depression and anxiety, so you want to learn, what would I do for attachment? What do I do for pride? Jealousy is another one, things like that. So we don't want to let the anxiety and the depression control us necessarily. Sometimes they do. Okay. So we acknowledge the existence of the delusion. Okay. And then we are working on it within our mind. I find I have to work on it on my cushion, formal meditation. And I'll discuss a little bit of that. And then you work off the cushion. Here I am in front of the person that's really affecting me, that's really upsetting me. Okay, can I take that basis of my meditation, my formal meditation practice, that foundation, and have it support me in doing the work with this person right now in front of me? How does it support you? Well, I've done a meditation on my cushion again and again and again in relation to this person. So now that I'm in front of them, will a better pattern be activated now because I practiced the better pattern? Better pattern. We talked a little bit this weekend, okay? So I mentioned if you're having a problem with a difficult person, can you put them in front of you in a meditation? And meditation is a form of rehearsal and practice. So like anything else we did to get good at it, we had to practice. But we get bored in meditation. Nothing's happening. There's no lights going on. You know, I meditated for 2 weeks and I'm the same. Okay, you have to be patient with yourself. It takes effort to get enlightened. I'm sorry to break it to you. But we know how to do effort. We make tremendous effort, just not in the right directions, right? So slowly you can meditate with the person in front of you. Maybe they're irritating. Maybe you hate them. They're interfering with you, harming you. And then you go through a series of different questions I mentioned. Did you ever consider their motivation? Do you know a lot about them? Sometimes we don't know and we have a story about them, but the story's not right. Could you change places with them for a moment and look out through their eyes, looking back at you, angry? They're, you know, looking at you, angry at them. How does that feel? What's that like, to be them? Slowly you work through this. And then you actually do, in your mind, a simple visualization meditation to go back into the situation with the person. Some nasty conversation, right? We've had this all the time. And I'm going to go back in there, and they're going to say exactly the same things they said, but now I'm going to rehearse a new behavior pattern that's positive and healthy. So that regardless of what they say, same things, I am going to practice making a new behavior pattern. And you have to practice it again and again and again because you will be back in front of the person and it's not familiar enough, the behavior pattern. So I'm going to mess up again, say the wrong things. So I go back to my cushion. And one day, automatically, the right thing will come out. You'll be amazed. Make sense? Everybody understand? So you can try that. That's some of the practice that we actually do, how we work on it, how we apply antidotes, okay, to dissolve. So let me go through some general ways of dealing with anxiety and depression before I get into more specific. And this is a short evening. Sometimes we do a whole weekend on this, and you know, with more meditations and things. Okay, number one, mindfulness or self-awareness. Mindfulness or self-awareness, dealing with anxiety and depression. What this means is you're noticing the arisal in your mind, the beginning of the anxiety, let's say, as it comes up. Before you have the panic attack, it's growing. You're noticing, or there's a trigger in your external reality. Oh, when that happens, I get really freaked out. Every time the light changes like that, or the car just went by really fast, or I can't find my phone, or it's dark out. We all have different triggers. You know, I think somebody's following me, or anything. So the beginning, if you can, slowly, you're just noticing something arising in your mind that it was different than the moment before. So here's a little bit of this anxiety coming in, you know. And I do know some people chronically depressed. Sometimes they notice the triggers that are going to send them into a tailspin down. Things are going along, and then things start changing. So if you notice that, you know, maybe you're able to not have it get so far into where you're already experiencing anxiety and depression. So it's beginning to, you are knowing your mind. process for you to get to know your mind. That's the only way you can control it, is to first know what's happening. Okay, so with mindfulness, for instance, the beginning is I'm just becoming aware that I notice there's a little hint of anxiety coming in. And so with mindfulness, we talked about this a little bit this weekend, basic mindfulness practice, you can work with your breath. We don't breathe enough effectively in our, it seems like everybody's shallow. People, okay, what if we really breathe, allowed ourselves to breathe? So you're noticing a little bit, I got a little bubbles now starting to arise of depression and oh no, and you start gripping. The mind's like, oh no, I don't want to, I don't want to get into this state. How about taking a nice deep breath? And another one. And so you can even start, as we were doing a little bit this weekend, is slowly let me bring in an inhale, spaciousness, and I'm going to release on an exhale, tightness. I'm going to take another breath in. I'm going to bring in, you can say the same thing, spaciousness, and I'm going to relieve tightness. Put any kind of positive word you're going to bring in, hope, and I'm going to release fear. I'm going to bring in positive thinking, and I'm going to release negative thinking. Put it into your own words. Okay? Now, initially, this takes practice, because if you're patterned for 40 years, and the worry and the fear and the anxiety comes in, spinning around, okay? You almost need like some severe crowbar to like stop the gear mechanism. So initially it's going to start happening and you won't be able to control it. Okay? And then what you need to do is you go back to some sort of sitting practice quietly. If you're not used to sitting and you don't have a meditation space in the house, quietly go to a room by yourself, sit on the couch, whatever it is, and go back into what is really going on. You have to start to analyze. You have to keep your breathing going. You have to keep breathing. Notice. So for me, the first thing is to use your breath, because it's always happening. We're not focused on it. The more you can start to focus calmly on your breathing, and most people say immediately it calms them down and starts to just open up perspective. Just to open up the perspective. And what I found is, as you're breathing, you start to be able to more readily go back to the breath when you're noticing negative mind states arising. It becomes a resource for you. Why not use it? It's always there. The next thing that mindfulness does, basic mindfulness, is as you're breathing, this isn't necessarily a Dharma practice, okay? You start breathing more deeply. Body's getting oxygen that it needs. I'm noticing most people that do a little bit of deep breathing, they start calming down, okay? And then basically, mindfulness is sort of feeling depressed right now. Period. You're just noticing a level of discomfort in your body, mind. That's it. Okay? What happens is chronic depression, anxiety, panic attacks, they carry on with a whole thought process that makes you more and more uptight and depressed and shallow breathing, I can't do this, and all the doors and windows are shutting. Right? Have you had that experience? Right? So basic mindfulness is just, I'm uncomfortable. And like I said on Saturday, life on this planet is uncomfortable. This is samsara. Okay? Samsara, Sanskrit word, to cycle, to turn. What are we turning through? Birth, old age, sickness, death. All of that is suffering. Birth, old age, sickness, death. That's it. That's reality. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy. If you understand more and more that samsara's nature is suffering, I personally enjoy more. Right? I don't expect the chocolate bar to last forever. That's not its nature. But chocoholics think it should. And when it's finished, they're upset. Okay, that's mundane. But people get depressed when the vacation ends, when that person moves away, when something changes in their vicinity. People get totally stressed. But change is a constant. So if we wake up and realize change is a constant, samsara sucks. So why did I expect, my car didn't start today, you might say? You know, well, that's how cars are. That's their nature. Right? So you don't get all bent out of shape. You're living your life by touching reality. You can be much happier. Much happier. Because these things are always going to happen. So slowly it's just, I'm uncomfortable. I'm depressed today. I'm having a panic attack. It gets to that extreme. I'm feeling really anxious. I'm afraid I'm going to have a panic attack. But maybe you don't need your thoughts to take you any further. End it there. And then you just keep breathing. And you can even have, sometimes in samsara it's like this. This is the nature of samsara. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. And especially people in our culture, I find, we need it to be comfortable. So, I mean, people in the States, I feel sorry for us because, you know, when it's not comfortable, it's really, and I was just joking, so I led this pilgrimage, but I've led many pilgrimages. And one of my favorite pilgrimages was with 5 other people from Lama Zopa Rinpoche's family, Sherpas, okay? Took them clear across India on trains and cars and all kinds of different transportation, and all 5 of them, they never once complained about anything. You know, that's not necessarily taking people from our culture, is it? I've been on many pilgrimages, people from our culture, and I'm always kind of like, that, you know, it starts in the evening, we have dinner together, and I'm like, buckle your seatbelt, what's it going to be this time? You know, what's the ride going to be this time? And it's just, you know, and the same with myself. I get a little bit out of the comfort, you know, I'm going over to Nepal. It's a fantastic experience. I'm so fortunate. But it's a lot less comfortable than the life I can lead in the States. And I have to adjust. You know, I have to kind of get ready in my mind. And as I get older, I have to get more ready because it is hard on the body. And when I come back, it's the same. I have to readjust. And where you feel when you come back, how spoiled you are. You know, and how, you know, I realize, and I'm just like marveling sometimes at just turning on the faucet and drinking water. You know, I'll just be standing there like, this is just amazing, you know, something we never think about. So life in samsara is just like that. And it is uncomfortable. We have comfort in it. That's fantastic. So rejoice. And when you do rejoice, it lifts you out of your depression. So number 2, but mindfulness and just self-awareness, just play with that as part of an antidote, as part of building it into your life, of just, you're just noticing, okay? And you're noticing without judgment on yourself, without trying to grip too much, because I know when people get anxious and they go, I'm gonna have a panic attack, I'm gonna have a panic, and it creates more of the panic attack. So what if you're just watching, you know, what if you're noticing that the thoughts that bubble up and make up panic and anxiety and fear and worry, did you ever analyze the thoughts? So we have to check into the thoughts and analyze what's happening. So this leads me into the next section. This is another general way of dealing with anxiety and depression. Remember the nature of the mind. Remember the nature of your mind. Okay, and what I mean by that, in the Tibetan Buddhist system, the mind has 2 qualities, only 2 qualities. Your mind, everybody's mind. If you don't know the answer to this, so if you already know the answer, don't say, because many of you have done mind courses, but the mind has 2 qualities. What are those qualities? So not if you already know the answer, but if you don't, what are the 2 qualities of your mind, would you say? What do you think?
Emotional and logical?
Emotional and logical?
Yeah.
Certainly has that in it, yeah, that's part of the mind. Emotional and logical. Emotional, would you say, coming from thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's an aspect of the thoughts, emotional, and then there could be logical thoughts, logic going on. Kind of like that. What else would you say?
Spacious.
Spacious, definitely spacious. That's definitely one of the qualities. So we would call the spacious part clarity. So the mind has clear light nature in its most subtle form, a clear light nature. It's like a spacious luminosity, okay? Is that how you feel your mind is? Right? Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Because people go, my mind is busy, busyness, clutter, okay? And the logical and the emotional is under what I would call the awareness part of the mind, of the other aspect. So the mind is clear and it's knowing. It knows things. Isn't that interesting? That's your mind. So then you say, well, what is all the garbage then that I have floating around, okay? And the mind in Tibetan Buddhism is not the brain, so it's not here, but in its most subtle experience, which is not physical like the brain. And they say it has no color, it has no shape, you can't cut the body open and say there's the mind. So it's very hard for us to conceive of what do the Tibetan Buddhists mean by consciousness, mind, same thing, consciousness, what do they mean? And in its most subtle experience, this clear light nature, which is the mind in its most subtle experience, is located more at the heart center. Not the organ, the heart, but a subtle energy system, the heart chakra, an energy, a wheel at the heart, and in the center of that is where the most subtle mind resides. And that is what they say goes on from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. So everything we think, say, and do leaves an imprint in that consciousness, and that's what carries on different lives. So it's very different than our experience of the brain. And then we say it's clear and knowing. Clear and knowing. Wow. Wouldn't we like to get ourselves back to that? So the clear and knowing is already there. You have it in you right now. You have Buddha nature as well. You have a heart of bodhicitta in you now, which is this enlightened attitude. It's all there. Why am I not experiencing my life that way? Why am I not manifesting that? Is simply because there are obscurations of delusion that are covering over those experiences. And you can slowly, like peeling an onion, through your practice, start to unfold until the Buddha nature shines through. Buddha nature is not that you are a Buddha, but you have a potential that can ripen into a fully awakened being. And every being with a mind has that. So let's go back first about the mind being clear and knowing. The knowing aspect is that there are moments of consciousness. One moment is causing the next moment, and that particular moment is the cause for the next moment, and that's a cause for the next moment, and the next moment, and the next moment. So if you're continuing ahead and you realize that every cause, Tibetan Buddhism says, every cause will have a result. That's nature, that's like a law. Every cause will have a result, so that you can never find the last result, because that last result you think is the end, is the beginning of another moment. That's the cause of another moment. So it would indicate that when you're dying in this life, Tibetan Buddhism says, even if when your body is finished, the most subtle consciousness is going on and it's causing, there's another moment, and that's the cause of the next moment and the next moment. So it indicates future lives. You can also trace back and say that this particular moment is the result of this preceding cause. And that's the result of another preceding cause. And that moment was caused by a moment before it. And you can go all the way back without finding a first moment of mind. So that indicates past lives. Is everybody following me? Everybody okay? So they talk about the beginningless and endless nature of mind in Tibetan Buddhism. It is a stream of thoughts, emotions, experiences, personality traits, going from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, until you get it perfect. And practice makes you perfect. Practice makes you a Buddha. And what perfect means is you're free of all fears, you have a incredibly blissful awareness every moment, you're omniscient, all-knowing, You're absolutely merged every moment with loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, and your whole purpose for being is to help every being you come in contact with. Every moment you're manifesting that without having to think about it. You're just there. You're just whatever works best, like that every moment. You're happy all the time, and I could go on and on. There's many qualities of the Buddha, of the omniscient mind. Sounds pretty good, right? No anxiety and depression there. Okay? But how do we get there? So, again, one thing that helps as a general antidote with anxiety and depression is to remind yourself and remember the nature of mind, the nature of your mind. And so I'll give you an example of how it works. You're noticing you get a little anxious, and here comes a worry in your mind, and you've been worried about this for the past month, okay? So I'm kind of like, worry is actually not innate with my mind. It's just simply, it's in there passing through. Why? Because there's previous habits and moments of worry and fear in my mind. It's the only reason they're there. Where does a thought come from? Do you ever think about that?
Preceding thought.
Preceding thought. Comes from preceding thought. You know, these are things people don't think about. We just have lots of thoughts. And then people go, I don't want to have these thoughts anymore. These are all these depressed thoughts. I don't want these thoughts. Okay, but first we have to understand, okay, so depression is not innate with my mind. In fact, I have a girlfriend who's been depressed, I don't know, like 40 years, I think. It's really pretty sad, so I remember her before she was depressed. I have a context with her before she was depressed. She was really fun, and I've seen her since she's depressed. And so she's more with people in her adult life who only know her as depressed. So she carts around this thing that she's a depressed person. And it's a major part of her life. Treatments, and it's affected her family and her kid, and this is her whole vibration about her life, like that. Now, it is a serious illness, so it's not that she's making it up, and it's quite serious. But at one point we were talking, and then I said, yeah, remember when I came to visit you? We were like 15, and I said, remember that time? And we were walking around the neighborhood, and we were doing goofy things that 15-year-old girls do, and she said, yeah, I remember that, and then I said, you weren't depressed then. And she kind of looked at me like she couldn't remember that, but she wasn't. And she looked, and I said, so just reminding her that there was time in her life she wasn't depressed, which means it's impermanent. It changes. So she's going through something for a long time that's quite chronic and things, but I remember she looked at me and she says, oh yeah, I wasn't I? I said, no, we remember how much fun we had? Like, and you were initiating the fun. Like, you were laughing, and a lot of it was from her. And because I was visiting her, it was her neighborhood. She knew what to do, what's kind of stuff there. So I was kind of following her. She was a little older than me, and so suddenly there's this like reminder for her that there was a time she wasn't depressed. So sometimes that's helpful to remind people that, and what happens is it becomes a habit in the mind. And part of the habit, unfortunately for some people, is karma. Okay, karma is the law of cause and effect. Karma means action in Sanskrit. So all karma's saying is everything you think, say, and do will leave an imprint in your mind for the future, and it will ripen in a certain way. So the positive things we think, say, and do ripen in happiness for us, and the negative things we think, say, and do ripen for suffering for us. So if you're experiencing panic attacks one after another and chronic depression for years, and it can be the result of some negative karma in the past, this life or past lives. How do you fix that? You do purification practices and wait until the cause exhausts itself. And it will at some point, because everything's changeable, nothing's permanent, and you can absolutely change your mind. But it would basically take a little bit of instruction, that you'd have a belief in this particular thing that you'd want to do, a little bit of faith in it. some instruction, and then to try to do it intently with good motivation like that. And these things aren't something that you just do for one night. It becomes a practice, and I just say for myself, excuse me, from doing some of these practices over time for a variety of things that my teachers advised, and I, in my mind, not that I'm any holy person, but honestly, I have seen changes for the better in my mind. So that deepens my faith. Like then I'm like, I think this works. So let me try another little practice. And then I, and if you can do some retreat, you're deepening the meditation. I found it really, really effective to combat negative mind states and patterns in my mind that I feel need changing, that are not beneficial in the world. And then we all have positive qualities as well, right? So if you suffer from anxiety and depression, a phenomenal meditation you can do is precious human rebirth, is to meditate on your precious human rebirth. And we've done it over the weekend. And there's traditional ways to do it. There are unconventional ways to do it where you're just appreciating the wonderful circumstances of your life, because you can turn on a tap and put a cup of water under it and drink it and not get amoebic dysentery. That's a luxury that a lot of people on the planet don't have. But do we ever appreciate that? That, and to come outside today and it rained and the air is just so clear and fresh. It's not like that in Kathmandu. It's horribly polluted there and dusty in some seasons. So after a few days, some people are wheezing. It's not an easy place to be. In the mountains, it's great, but Kathmandu itself. So there's two things. And so so that's the main thing. If for really one antidote to combat anxiety and depression is basic appreciation of your life. And the second part is your good qualities. Because anxiety and depression, especially depression, doesn't acknowledge your goodness. Okay, and fundamentally everybody's good. That's my view. But you have some good qualities. Some people feel blocked from acknowledging them. That's your practice then. That's your practice. Is sometime to sit down, whether you wake up in the morning doing it, or in a formal meditation practice, acknowledging some of your good qualities. Because depression is very, very familiar with everything negative that you're doing and everything that's wrong with the planet. Depression knows that. So all you're doing is, if you just want to think those thoughts, that's what you're planting, that's what you're familiarizing your mind with. And then if I say, well, wait a minute, I remember in my 20s I got depressed at one point. I think I was working too hard. I got this job, and I just somehow was working all the time, and my mind was and it kind of went on, I don't know, about 2 or 3 months, and I was debating I should do something about it, and I talked to my doctor, and and then I remember in this funk, because she was saying you need to go out and do something fun, or you need to, but then I came home and there was an old woman that lived a floor above me it was a walk-up apartment building. She lived above me, and I happened to meet her when she was coming home with some packages. And so you see this, and depression's a little bit like, oh, this is so sad, or like, I don't want to talk to anybody. Sometimes depression, I don't want to see the name. She'd always say hi, but somehow I was able to you see her, and then it's like, I can carry her packages. Like, fortunately, that thought was in there. Why is that thought in there? From previous thoughts like that. This life or past lives. So fortunately, that thought was there and popped up at that moment, rather than, oh, woe is me, right? It popped up, I see her, and I just said, can I take your packages? Yeah, I wasn't happy. I wasn't like, I was like, can I help you with your packages? I'm just kind of there on the street, and she's like, oh, please, and I go up and I help her with her packages, and she's so happy, and then suddenly I was like, a little piece of happiness, a little bubble of happiness comes up. Okay, so another thing that's really helpful with depression, I find depression is this negative cycling of the mind. It gets looped in there, gets stuck. Okay, and when it goes on for a long time, it gets really stuck. And then antidepressants seem to help people at times. It sometimes can just get you over the hump, so you can start making some positive decisions again. Some people need that. I'm not a real advocate for lifelong medication if you can manage it otherwise. But it does seem to help some people, and I know that they all come with side effects, these drugs, and sometimes you have to be on them for a year, because if you get off sooner, so find out if it's a situation like that, what the scenes are. But I find if you have a meditation practice and you're doing some of these techniques, almost as good, and some people have worked their way out of it without medication. But it can be helpful to see a therapist, to talk to somebody. And sometimes the antidepressants, they do help when there's like physiological imbalance that sometimes causes depression and anxiety. So again, this is just a simple thing of starting to plant some imprints in the mind of the goodness, the positive. I'm good enough, I'm okay. I helped my neighbor with her packages. Like, that felt good. I like that experience. So then what I did the next week, because the doctor was also saying you should, once a week, you've got to do a good deed for somebody. Good deed for somebody. So I was like, okay, that sounds good. I'm going to try it. And the next week, I bought her flowers, the woman, delivered to the door. And so slowly, it just catapulted me out, because I started really gravitating to what was feeling good, as opposed to wallowing in what didn't. But what happens for a lot of us is we're lazy. So the doctor, I don't know how many of you go to the doctor for whatever thing. If it's like you got knee issues, the physical therapist might give you exercises. The doctor might tell you this, this, and this. You need to avoid this food. You need to get more rest. You need to get exercise. And how many of you listen to the doctor? Most people don't, I don't think, right? It's so interesting. Most people go, yeah, okay, and maybe for the first week you kind of, you watch your salt intake. But that's it. Then you go, a lot of people don't listen. So it's your choice, and I know that wallowing mind that is lazy, and it just goes back into the rut. The rut feels more comfortable, but it's miserable. But you're just used to it, and the rut's really deep, so it's easy to fall into it. So this is, again, Tibetan Buddhism. Mind and its functions in meditation is all about creating new neural pathways, healthy behavior patterns. It's possible. Excuse me. Scientists have found now that they're tracking the brain and noticing with criminals, with people with a lot of hostility and people with different issues. So when they start doing certain meditations, different parts of the brain activate that make them happier, that make them more compassionate, make them calmer. And you notice this in your own life. Some people ask me, when I became a nun, you take vows of celibacy, okay? So some people ask me that, and they said, wow, what's that like? And so what I also told them is I wasn't always a nun, so I had partners, and what I found with sex was the more you did it, the more you wanted to do it. It was an imprint, desire. I know people that are kind of very avid shoppers. They love shopping for anything. They love shopping. And so it's a habit. So for them, there's something happens and they're like, let's go shopping. And I'm always like, really? I don't like shopping much, So I'm always like, well, this is what I would shop for. I'll be like, is it a camping store? Yeah. I love that. Take me to a camping store any day, right? But it's just, so look at your habits. What are my habits? Some of them may be great. Some of us have some great habits, and then we might have other habits. Things like that. So remembering the nature of the mind, that depression and anxiety are not innate with my mind, but right now I am having experience of that in my mind. Okay, so if I'm using my mindfulness, step number 1, and now remember the nature of the mind. Okay, so what happens is you may wake up one morning and there's heavy depression in your mind and you can't even get out of bed. So this is where we've got the bank of rain clouds obscuring our view of the clear blue sky. We all know behind the rain clouds that there's a clear blue sky, but sometimes we can't see it. So we just had 3 days here of rain, and then I watched, and it was really neat. at this apartment I'm staying in. Is Beate here? No, I was looking up because she's so lovely. It's very sweet. And you can look out and there's there's some buildings and stuff, but I noticed there was this massive cloud bank, low, but the sun was coming in above it. I saw that. It was very nice, and it was the first we'd seen the sun in a few days, but then there's the cloud bank. So that's heavy delusion. That's anxiety and depression. And sometimes I can't see the clear blue sky, but I know it's back there. I know my mind is actually good and whole and clear and knowing, but right now it's just obscured by the bank of depression. That's all. So rather than engaging and elaborating on it and going, what if you just stopped and just noticed it like that, but reminded yourself of the clear and knowing nature of your mind? That's the true quality of your mind. So reminding ourselves of those can a little bit more not have us hanging out so much in the delusion, the delusional pattern. The other thing to know is, so you wake up with the depression, you're feeling anxious. These mental events, these thoughts and emotions that I'm now experiencing, they're impermanent. Did you ever pose to yourself, they're impermanent? They don't last. Like when I poked my friend and said, you weren't depressed then, I remember. It was like a little light went off for her. She was like, she had to think about it. She said, she told me later, she thought about that a lot. I said, you didn't have depression in your mind then. So you can also not have depression in your mind again, because that was there, but then you got a pattern over here, slowly. So they are impermanent. Depression, it appears and it disappears. Worry, anxiety, you're going to have this worry, but last week you had a different worry. So it comes and it goes, and sometimes you're not worried. Sometimes you're not worried at all. So they're not fixed entities. They're not fixed entities. You have to keep reminding yourself of that, because sometimes it feels really heavy. That. The other thing we've done sometimes is meditation on the clarity of consciousness. And we did one yesterday morning in the meditation, was like that meditation, clarity of consciousness, using a mountain lake. And is like your mind, a clear mountain lake. And the top is like glass, it's very smooth and clear, and then a bubble comes from the depths to the surface, like a thought, okay? And you have light little thoughts, and they come to the surface, and ripples go out, okay? Often it's everyday activities, thoughts, we've got ripples going. But then chronic depression comes in, heavy bubble comes to the surface, and big ripples come, churning up the surface. So my mind doesn't feel clear, it's disturbed, I don't have any perspective, but eventually that bubble has no essence. So if I can release it more quickly, not pay as much attention, and not over-elaborate on it, that I'm not a depressed person, okay, it's gonna go back into the surface. The ripples subside. Because some people are over-identified with their delusion. Some people cart it around of like, I have my depression. Like I can't really participate because, I'm depressed. So they kind of wear it as their identity, like that. So you could see these experiences as also, you could use it as clouds in the sky. It's another way of doing the meditation, clouds in the sky. You have a clear blue sky, it's like your mind. You can visualize that. And clouds appear, just like thoughts in the mind. I have light, little puffy thoughts, like a little puffy cloud, and it comes into the sky for a while. It changes, stays in the thing, and then it's gone. But sometimes I have a heavy rain bank of clouds. But I know that's not the sky, it's not my mind. Slowly letting it go, not over-elaborating, not wallowing in it. And if I can't release it that moment, this is samsara, I'm just uncomfortable like that. Sometimes that's okay to just leave it for the day, provided it's not going on and on and on and on. That. So they can be, you could see them like clouds in the sky. They're like dreams. They really have no sustenance, no essence. These thoughts that are coming through, these have, no essence. It's like a rainbow, like it looks like it's there, looks really, but there's nothing there. So you can see it like that. They come and they go. You can also notice, because you live near the sea, how the waves, you can see delusions like that. Some of them are huge waves churning everything up, but then it changes. And then it comes up to the ground and it's nothing. And then it's back out, and that's our mind, up and down, and so you can see it like that. Rather than it having a solid essence, it's changing all the time. Another thing I find helpful is to de-identify with the emotion. De-identify with the emotion, meaning when my friend was like, well, I'm depressed. I'm a depressed person, she said. So no, she just has a lot of depression in her mind. So it's lighter, it's not as heavy. She just has depression in her mind. But some people like to identify, I'm a really anxious person. No, you just might have more anxiety in your mind than this guy has a lot of fear in his mind. Or she's angry. She has anger in her mind moving through. So for me, when I notice a delusion arising, sometimes I'll just be like, somebody's in front of me, something's happening, and then I notice irritation in my mind coming up. But it's not about me, so it's like, oh, look at that bubble. Oh yeah, there's irritation. Hi. Bye. Talk to your delusion. You can, with humor, make it funny, play with it. So, because more quickly when I've done that and I've noticed, as opposed to earlier in my life, I'm not angry. Right? When I was seething, But now I'm kind of like, hey, there's irritation. Yeah. And I know you really well, so thank you very much. Bye. Don't really need you in my mind right now. And it really does sort it. I'm really like, I'm just familiar with irritation. Okay, there it is again, but I court it less and less. I don't really need it there anymore. So it more quickly moves off. More quickly. So again, you're not a depressed person. There's just maybe a lot of depression in your mind sometimes, but it changes. And then what's also helpful is being non-judgmental. Being non-judgmental. Right? Tell that to a lot of Americans. We're burning up here. Now, how about your weather? This is winter, right, for Floridians. Each person I keep seeing here, they're like, it's winter. It's really cold. Yeah, and it is for Florida. It's chillier, but beautiful weather after the rain. It's just been beautiful. Being non-judgmental. So what happens for you also is anxiety gets going, depression gets in there, is manifesting, okay? And then you lay a trip on yourself. Like it gets heavier. You're over elaborating. Like, oh no, I'm depressed. I can't go to the party. I'm depressed again. And I'm terrible. I'm horrible. I shouldn't have this thought. I shouldn't be depressed. Well, you should be depressed. We're in samsara. It's depressing. But the thing is, again, we can fully enjoy our lives. It's not like we're wallowing in samsara, but you want to make the most meaning of life, and it can be really enjoyable. Okay? But what happens is we start tightening. Oh, I'm worrying again. Oh, I got this worry in my thing. I'm starting to worry, and I'm starting, and I shouldn't worry. And we start with the shoulds on ourselves. I shouldn't worry, and I shouldn't be doing this, and I shouldn't be depressed. I have everything going in life. I shouldn't be depressed. Just for a moment, be still, and just go back to your breathing. You don't need all the judgment mind, and that's just a habit as well. So again, take a deep breath and watch. Observe. So you say you don't have time during the day to observe? Everybody has time, okay? But that's why I have also formal meditation practice, where I observe a little bit more deeply, quietly on my own time, but then I go out in the world, and you might be at work, an office, or So you go to the bathroom at some point. I observe when I go to the bathroom. I mean, not what I'm doing in the bathroom, right? But my mind. My mind. I'm able, because I have a little quiet moment and I'm kind of like, just had that interaction with a coworker and it was okay, but something was a little off. So, so instead of worrying about that whole thing for the whole night, I write there, something was a little off. Did I say anything funny? No, I think it was okay. It may not be personal. The way she was acting might have nothing to do with me. We always think it's about us, right? So this way, right there, 2 minutes in the bathroom, and I'm kind of like, no, I'm okay, it's okay. Or I can go into the bathroom, reestablish my motivation for the day. I had a motivation in the morning to direct the activities of my body, speech, and mind towards something positive that will get me enlightened more quickly so I could benefit all living beings. But now I'm in a workspace and I don't like that guy. So I want to benefit all living beings except them. So I go back in the bathroom and I'm irritated with them and I'm, back in the bathroom and I remind myself, oh yeah, I had this motivation this morning and I just kind of left him out of it right now. So a couple of breaths, everything's okay. There's really no problem here. Breathe and you can come out, reestablish the motivation and come out of the bathroom. New space. Or if there is a problem that needs to be addressed, but I have more spaciousness and perspective to then deal with it. If I need to say something to somebody about, we had that conversation and I was a little hurt by what you said and I'm just wondering if I understood it right and I'm sorry if I upset you, and better to just directly get it out and then I'm not obsessing all night about it. Take care of it, but take care of it with a good motivation. Like that. Gentleness, kindness towards others. We have to try. So be careful of the judgmental thoughts that hold you hostage. They hold you hostage. They are, oops, here we go. You're laying extra trips on yourself, getting down on yourself, or overinflating yourself. That doesn't have to happen. It's not balanced, okay? And then it's not peaceful for your mind either. So what we're trying to do is to cultivate a sense of equanimity also with ourselves, equal regard, meaning I might notice some negative thoughts I have that pop up, like I mentioned irritation, and I went like, okay, sometimes I have irritation in my mind. I spent years trying to make samsara perfect. That was part of my, I thought you could fix it. You can't, but you can fix your mind, then more peaceful. So I have remnants of that samsara is not perfect, that sips in, so sometimes I'm annoyed by something or irritated. So now I notice it in my mind, irritation, like that. But then, and so I accept that about myself, but I'm working on it. So there's a lot less irritation in my mind. And I'll notice and I'll be like, yeah, but with loving kindness towards myself. And also with an acknowledgement of the good stuff I do and the good qualities I do have in a balanced way. Not like I'm the greatest person on the planet, but it's kind of this taking some of the negative stuff I've got going, the positive stuff. This is me giving it my best shot. That's okay. That's okay. Okay. Everybody okay? Let's do a little bit more specifics. I want to go into worry, fear, and anxiety first. It's actually very, very practical when we're working with this. Worry, fear, and anxiety. You have to analyze. We do analytical meditation in Tibetan Buddhism. It's one of our main meditations. So we have analytical meditation, and then we have more a meditation that's more about concentration. And this is what we think of as meditation. You're placing your mind on an object, and you're keeping it there stably. That's what we often think of as meditation. And it's called shine in Tibetan, calm abiding. Placing your mind calmly on an object, and it abides there, it stays there, okay? But the other meditation we do is analytical. We analyze. It's super effective. I find it really, really helpful. So you do a combination, but analytical meditation, very, very helpful, very necessary. The thing is, we're already used to doing it. We all know how to do it. We just don't do it focused in the right way. An example, you got irritated by somebody you work with, and you go home, and first you're with your coworkers, he's such a jerk. Did you hear what he said? He's such a jerk. He's stupid. Stupid. You go home, you get your partner, then you tell them how stupid this person is and what they said, and then your kid comes home and then you tell them, and then you tell another friend, and you get on the phone at night and you say it again. They're stupid, this is analytical meditation, because you're going from every angle about the person. Did you see the shirt he wore the other day? It was ugly. Did you see his hair is really, every angle to convince yourself that the person is stupid. That's not beneficial. There's no point. But what if I come back about my fear, my worry, my anxiety, and start analyzing? Does anybody have anything they'd like to bring up? A fear, a worry, and anxiety? What are you worried about? What are you worried about?
Money always.
Worry about money. Okay. This is a big worry from people. Money. Such a funny thing, money, isn't it? Okay. So you worry about money. So let's think about, what can I do about money if I'm worried about it? What can you do?
Get another job.
Get another job.
Save.
You can
Budget, save.
budget and save.
Change your perspective on material things.
Change your perspective on money and material things. Yeah.
Prioritize.
You can prioritize. These are all great things, right? Reduce your costs.
You can say right now, is everything okay? Like, I had dinner, I had clothes, I had friends, bills are all paid.
That's right. Perfect. And these are all perfect things. So you really have to analyze. If you just say, well, I'm kind of worried about money, it becomes a free-floating, and you're worried about money, and then that habit of worrying about money is always in there. It's always in your mind, okay? But when you really start asking all these things, like, okay, maybe I need to get a second job. Maybe I need to get a better paying job than I have. Oh, maybe I need to get trained to do that. Maybe I need to move to do that. Maybe I need to reorient my perspective and priorities. All these things. And then I need to understand, maybe I'm living more, spending more than I have. So I'm gonna re-budget, do the things. And then if you realize, I think the most powerful one is, I have food, I have enough clothes, I can pay my rent, I have a place to live, I can pay my rent, I have a vehicle I can get around, and is there really a problem? And a lot of people I know now, retiring, about to retire, thinking about retiring, or saving for retirement, the planet's kind of changing, and it's hard to believe that most people are gonna have enough money anyway. So do you need to spend all the time worrying about it? Is it worth worrying about it if we're all gonna kind of be in the same boat? I'll put it this way, does worry put any more money in the bank? And I haven't ever found it to put more money in the bank. I'd be interested if it did. We'd all be worrying a lot, right? But it doesn't. So, but again, you have to remind yourself again and again about those things. You can't just one time, because if the worry imprint is in your mind, it'll still come up. I said to a friend today that when we went to visit Peter Baker yesterday, who was a wonderful man who founded Milarepa Center in Vermont and gave the property, offered this huge property, and ran it for many years and hosted incredible programs, but he's in Florida and he's in a nursing home, and he's, not in very good shape, the poor guy. And so a few of us went to see him yesterday. He's an old friend. And then sometimes when I go into these state-run nursing homes, because sometimes I visit people that are sick, and sometimes I have this little moment of am I gonna end up in a place like this? It does come up. And then it goes away, because but it's still in there somehow, because it still comes up once in a while, and then I'll go, don't worry about that. There's no point worrying about it. But so sometimes we have many worries that come up a lot, and then sometimes ones that just cycle. But I think very powerful if you're realizing this is what I have, and people are redirecting funds to, if you need to see about saving and doing this more, living simply. It's a huge movement actually in the States of living more simply now, that people are getting into that. I know in Vermont there's a big tiny house movement that's spreading in other states. It's people living in very small spaces, and we built a small cabin. We built a couple when I was at Milarepa, but one of them was totally contained like a one-bedroom apartment. And several people that came and saw it after it was finished were like, what else do you need? They're like, this kind of does it all. Like, you have everything here that you really need. Like, it was, so it gave people some thought. I remember some people that had a few changes to their life after they saw the cabin, and they were getting rid of stuff, and they were, like, it's so simple. And then there's a lot less to worry about, a lot less concern, and so it was really interesting. So, but the thing is, you have to do it in a meditation. It's helpful a little bit more deeply over and over to deal with the money worry. Is if you apply all these things regularly, eventually it starts dissolving. Or you start changing things in your life, and as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, if you're worried about something, you need to analyze, what can I do about it? And if there's something realistic you can do, then do it. Why wait? Just get it together and figure out how to do it, and get help if you need doing, and do it. And he said, sometimes you figure out, like let's say you have a concern about money, and you go, I got the better paying job, and I'm really happy here. I have this, I have this, I have this, okay, so there's really no point worrying. I can't do anymore. I've done it all. No other point. Or you decide, I'm not gonna get a second job, I'm not gonna move, I'm not gonna do this, so there's no point then, just let it go. And then we have to practice the thought, we have to practice letting go, because it hangs on due to previous imprints of it. Yes, other things about worry, and
Yes.
we stay on that topic, yeah.
Yeah. For many years, especially the last 10 years down here, because I didn't have enough money for basic needs, and it's like, how am I gonna get food, and it's the same worry, whether you have, worry is worry, it doesn't matter how much. Until I realized, I guess possibly from Shantideva, possibly from hearing it over and over again, even if I don't have enough for my basic needs, and let's say for circumstances I can't work, it's now, it's so much of a waste of
Right,
time to worry. It's not gonna make it like.
that's right.
And just
Absolutely.
in the last month, it's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah, no, very helpful.
yeah.
Because it's true, when you look at the energy spent, we're just talking about worry and anxiety and fear, the energy spent in it, it's not doing anything about it. Now, I know people have a thing where one of my nephews, before he takes an exam, he has to worry the night before it doesn't go well. But you know, people have a thing of, if I don't worry, then, but that's a pattern as well. But sometimes that's more of a joke for people.
Yeah.
Or is it becoming etched into your mindset, where then you're worrying more and more, you find yourself worrying more and more? But I think that's a good one, is you realize it's not necessarily helping anything. And what I did see with Peter yesterday, he's been in 3 or 4 nursing homes. I visited him in 3. And this has been going on for, I'm guessing, about 6 years. I think 6 or 7, or maybe 7 or 8 years. And he doesn't have any money, and he's being cared for. Like, it was okay. The way, the care I saw, wasn't that the place was glamorous by any means, but he is getting the care that he seems to need. Now, sure, if he had kids, or if he had a different scene, maybe they would have done more testing on him to figure out what's happening, but he might be in the same exact situation as he's in now. So it's like, somehow, things get taken care of. Things seem to be taken care of, and I'm not being pie in the sky. And I do know, I'm living next to this very poor community outside Philadelphia, Chester, Pennsylvania, and I've been involved with some people there. It's very bad there. The crime is bad, and and the level of health care because they're poor people. So that is a challenge often. But then I, saw him, he's considered a poor person without resources, and somehow the system has managed him without anybody, he fell, he was injured at one point, they got him to the hospital, they got him into the right setting, somehow they're managing. So it's interesting, it happens. And certainly people fall through the cracks, but then, sometimes that happens like that, so. Because often I've seen wealthy people that fall through the cracks and die miserable, absolutely miserable. So money doesn't make you happier, clearly, like that, as a thing to worry about.
At one point, I went to a mindfulness retreat, one of those ones with, vaccine, for a week, because I thought, like, from now to the time I die, I'm gonna ruin the quality of my day, my life, by having this work. It's just gonna ruin, it's really gonna spoil the joy and being with love and everything. And is there some way I can manage it? And, when you started, when you said the 3 belly breaths, take 3 breaths. When I feel it, like when I go to pay my bills, I always have enough money to pay the bills, but I go into this sort of spastic state, and it permeates the day. And so when I can get it under control and sort of take the 3 belly breaths and say, hey, you can enjoy, you're gonna have fun today, you're gonna,
Right.
be open with that crowd who wants to worry and ruminate on this.
Yeah.
Not enough, not enough, not enough.
Yeah.
I mean, look, what do you got enough of? That sunshine like out the Zoom here, like usually, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's part of analyzing, noticing, do I want to spend all my time thinking about these things? It doesn't benefit anybody, it doesn't help anybody. So you have to analyze the fear and the worry. So here's some steps with this. Be aware of and acknowledge your fears. It's okay to understand, what are you afraid of, okay? And then think about the nature of samsara. Samsara, cyclic existence. Think about its nature. Its nature is suffering. This is its nature. This is kind of like a given. It's just a given. So therefore, as long as we are in samsara, we are going to experience problems. We're going to experience problems. That's its nature. We're not in a pure realm yet. But the thing is, what's also important to understand is you can get out of samsara. You're not stuck in it. You can get out of it. Okay, but in the meantime, can I just accept that this is samsara's nature, because it tends to decrease fear? When I realize this is how it is, this is how it is. So more of that acceptance, I think. And again, remembering it is possible to become free from samsara. How? Practice dharma. Practice dharma. And if you're like, well, what do I do? Come to the center. They've got brilliant courses. They have a teacher here, Venerable Tendrin. She's great. Many people helping. It's fantastic. In fact, another antidote to fear, courage. Courage. Okay? So this is developed by facing your fears. Facing your fears and understanding exactly what it is you fear. Because sometimes we're not sure, but what it is you fear. So then you want to ask yourself, when you're clear about what you're really afraid of, is it reasonable to have this fear? So those of you that are worriers and anxiety, is it reasonable to have this fear? Then you want to ask, is there anything I can do to prevent this unwanted thing from happening? Or can I minimize the chances of it happening? You have to kind of really get up close and personal. Get in there. Because when fear is looming over you and you haven't looked at it, it's going to be looming. Huge. But when I come in there, I'm kind of like, what am I really afraid of? Or it boils down to this one little thing. Okay, so then I'm going to analyze. Is it reasonable to have that fear? I'll give you an example. I have a fear of dying in a lot of pain, the unmanageable pain. Okay? I've seen people die like that, and they died. They made it through, meaning the pain ended. How long did it go on for? Well, 3 weeks could be a long time, but it wasn't always there during the 3 weeks. Sometimes medication worked, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes they were laughing, sometimes they were funny, some different. So I'm kind of, when I look at it, I go, well, I'm not gonna spend my whole life worrying about that. And I hope that if I put it into my Dharma practice, then whatever is arising, and if it's a lot of pain, I'll do the meditations I know to kind of manage the pain. And I'll do the best I can. And if I have to die in a lot of pain, I hope it purifies something really negative so I can have a good rebirth and like that. And then I don't really spend a lot of time worrying about it. But it's actually dissolved quite a bit. So you have to kind of really look at it. And what would it be like, you know? And I have seen people in pain for years and things, and just at that point I'll deal with it if it comes, but I want to get the Dharma practice going so I'm ready for whatever comes, because that's samsara. There's going to be problems, there's going to be suffering. That. And then another thing about when you analyze, is it reasonable to have this fear? Is there anything I can do to minimize it happening? And if there's little or nothing that can be done about it, then can I learn to accept this fear? Because for me, a little bit in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, I do have this fear dying in a lot of pain. It doesn't dominate my existence, but I do acknowledge that I'd like to try to avoid that, and not be completely doped up on morphine. You know, I want to have some lucidity. So a little balance, and sometimes they can't strike the balance, but I'll do the best I can with that. So mostly then it goes, and I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. Make sense? So you have to do this process yourself, really get in there. The other thing is, in Buddhism, we would cultivate the practice of taking refuge. Taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the Buddha, as we know, is historical Buddha, that lived in, on an ultimate level, the omniscient mind. I would take refuge in an all-knowing mind. You know, when I've consulted with my teacher and some other teachers that I feel have a pretty highly realized mind, and I've gotten advice from them, and I put the advice into practice, followed the advice, I've really liked the result that I got. So it kind of deepens my faith in the omniscient mind. So I would certainly find protection there and seek that as a support and a refuge, a shelter, like that. And then the Dharma are the teachings, and ultimately the teachings on emptiness. So for me, when I gotten into trouble in my practice, or mainly on retreat, if I'm isolated for several months and suddenly kind of depressed, or I'm kind of lonely, or what am I doing, and then I go into some emptiness teachings, no problem. Totally, boom, I'm out of it. Like that. Easy, like that. So that's something where the Dharma is certainly a refuge. That seems to really work. And over the course of my life now, I'm really so convinced of, like, yeah, the Dharma really does free you on that level. So taking refuge could be really helpful if you actually went through a refuge ceremony and acknowledge this is your path, but you really feel it in your heart. That's even more important. More important. And I mentioned once a story some years ago. I lived in California for many years, and in the early days before the internet, I was flying back to Philadelphia to see my family from California, and there was a great Lama living at Lama Zopa Rinpoche's house in California near me, and I saw him a lot, Rinpa Rinpoche. So I made the reservation for the flight, and then in those days, remember, you had to reconfirm your flight like 2 days before. You'd have to call. So I call up, and they tell me that my reservation was canceled. And I'm like, what? And I could still get the flight, and it was the same price, but I said I didn't cancel it. And so we talked for a while, and they get me on the flight. Okay, great, same flight, no problem. So I called the next day just to check again, because I was a little nervous about it. And they said my reservation was canceled again. Second time. So I happened to be with Rinpa Rinpoche, and for a moment I thought, is this a message from the universe that I shouldn't take this flight? And I asked him, and I said, is there any issue, Rinpoche, or, you know, I thought he was like clairvoyant or something. And then he just looked at me, kind of dismissed me, and he goes, if you have proper refuge, it doesn't matter if the plane crashes. and suddenly I was like, I hadn't thought about that, but so there are times I'm on planes, you know, and now I'm like thinking of my teachers. So if you have refuge, that's something you can call up if you're gripped with fear or you have something like that going on, is ask the Buddhas for help. And the Sangha I mentioned, I forgot to mention, is the spiritual community, like a center like this, or a little more specifically monks and nuns, but ultimately the Arya Sangha, and they're the beings that have had a direct perception of emptiness, which emptiness being the real refuge, those kind of teachings. So just to say, phenomenally helpful, I think, the practice of really looking at refuge where we get in trouble, and then our coping mechanisms are very different than taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And they're usually temporary things that really don't sustain us and don't seem to help us dissolve the fears. Here's another technique, another thing to think about is think about karma. If you have fear, anxiety, and depression, I must have created the cause for this in the past. I'm not laying a trip on myself, I'm just saying the cause has had to have been there for this result to ripen. And I'm struggling with the result, based on your fear or anxiety. But if I can dismantle the cause, and I do that through purification practices, or at least acknowledge that there must have been a previous cause that's causing it, it's a little less charged I have to get by the anxiety and depression. It's not that there's something wrong with me, and it's not that I will be this way forever. It's just there's still a cause in there, and I don't want to dance with it too much because it's going to make more imprints. So sometimes acknowledging that can be really helpful, the law of cause and effect. There are also, for instance, fears. People have phobias. People afraid of spiders, or they're afraid of dogs. And it could be that in a past life you were bitten by a bunch of dogs. So it would make it natural that the first time you see a dog, that there's some kind of, sometimes it's like that. We also notice with certain people we meet, there's some people we're just drawn to and have an instant connection, and there's some people we don't have much of connection with, or it's a negative connection. And sometimes you've never met the person, you're like, I don't know why I don't like them. I've never even interacted, but some past karma thing that's showing its face, like that. So another fear people have, usually this is a very deep fear, is the fear of death. Fear of death. So we have a 9-point death meditation and various teachings about death, to acknowledge it not in a morbid way, but to motivate your practice, kind of wake you up to do meaningful things in your life and not waste time. So if you get familiar slowly with that, sometimes it decreases. I'm more ready for death. I'm doing what I need to be doing. I'm not wasting the time. That. If your mind starts ruminating, if you're a looper, anxiety and depression, a lot of people with worry do, over and over and over, and then my worry, my worry, my worry. Om mani padme hum, om mani padme hum, om mani padme hum, om mani padme. Say a mantra. Just get the mind out of the loop. Say a mantra, start doing something good, put some habits, because for me with my little exercise of doing the one good thing a week that I did practice, it bumped me, as I said, it bumped me out of the depression. I somehow started to get more into that, and I started doing more of that a week than just once a week. But if you need to recite some prayers, read something, and I'd be on retreat sometimes alone for a few months, and I always had a copy of the Songs of Milarepa. They have a copy in Laudo, and I would always take it, you can take books to your room, and I immediately, I'm going to do retreat, I grab that book, and sometimes my mind would be kind of sinking, and I just open the book wherever it landed, and I'd read. Great, just uplifting. So find what it is that catapults you out of the ruminating mind. Something, if there's some positive action, activity you can interject, can be really helpful to start to make that a pattern. And again, it takes a while till the new pattern takes hold. So you're going to forget to do it. So if you want, leave yourself, people put affirmations on their bathroom mirror, leave a note. You have to make effort in your practice if you want to change your mind. Sorry to break that to you. You have to make effort, and it does take some effort, and it's the most worthwhile effort I've made. It really works. It's really helpful. The other thing is, can you keep a balance in general? Okay, you've got the extreme of excessive worrying, okay? And then you may have an extreme of irresponsibility on the other hand. So what if you had a balance where you're taking care of what you need to take care of? I'm not being overly lazy, shirking this responsibility, blowing that thing off. Got the balance, have some breaks, have your rest time, have your eyes open, then a little bit more reasonable going forward. Okay, let me say a little bit about depression, even though I brought this on depression, pages from Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Many students. So, wait, I'll read this after, but these are some general things for depression, again, and they're related to what I've already been talking about. So, examine what your mind is saying when you're depressed. Examine what your mind is saying when you're depressed. I don't know if some of you have had periods of depression, anything, what was your mind saying when you get depressed, or when you were depressed? Yeah.
I had been meditating a while, and then I heard a song on the radio, and it kind of triggered a feeling of jealousy, and then I went with it, just imagining the scenario that wasn't even happening. It was all in my head, but fortunately, I had started meditation so I could catch that. It was remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, and also music can often trigger a lot of emotional responses. And so I find sometimes I limit what I'm listening to if I'm listening to music, and I find it really is, it's unbelievable, you know, you're on retreat for a few months, 14,000 feet up in the Nepal Himalayas, and, you know, I have suddenly like, I wish I were an Oscar Mayer Wiener. I mean, can you, I mean, this is, so even hearing popular music and hearing classical music, or depending on your own thing, but those imprints are in there. You know, I was an American kid, so that stuff is in my mind, and I'm amazed when it comes up. Sometimes I'll be like, what? You know, I can't keep the Buddhism in there, but I've got Oscar Mayer Wiener really heavily in there. But I do find other music triggers emotional things. You'd be like, oh, that's when I broke up with so-and-so, or oh, that's when my dad died, or things. So sometimes a lot of music can prey on that with your, you know, you have to be skillful with it. But it's great what you used it to get out, to let it go with meditation. So if you have, the other thing is what you're saying, and you were noticing how you were going off on these stories. So you have to analyze, is it realistic what my mind's telling me? Sometimes in depression, anything else your mind tells you when you're depressed? Yes?
That I'm hopeless.
That you're hopeless.
Never be able to do something.
You never do anything right.
I'm not able to do it.
Right.
Set unrealistic standards for yourself.
What's that?
I have a tendency to set unrealistic standards for myself.
Yes, yeah, are we setting ourselves up for failure? Are we setting ourselves up to be depressed? Sometimes we do. Yeah, so then it's balancing. A little bit back is what my mind's coming up with, my ideas, and what the stories my mind's now telling me. Are they realistic? No. I have to keep asking myself that. Is this realistic? And then if you notice that you have a habit of setting unrealistic goals for yourself, for your life, and I have some friends that I call them sabotagers. Okay, they're great folks, but they get these unrealistic things they're gonna do, and I'm like, and then they get disappointed and they lay a trip on themselves. You know, so can we get real with ourselves to kind of say, I'd really love to go to Everest Base Camp, you know, but it's 19,000 feet and blah, 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 and like, is it worth really doing that and making that push, or I could stay on retreat longer? What's really reasonable for you that you think is gonna be, you know? I mean, I've never been to base camp. I never had an interest to go. And then it was so cute on our pilgrimage. A couple guys went off on their own trip after to try to go to base camp. I think one of them made it, and the other guy was in his 60s, early 60s. And our main tour coordinator in San Francisco, Effie, who's wonderful, they arrange that with her before they leave if they want auxiliary trips. It's great. And she can just hook them up, and then off they go. And so he wanted to do this other kind of thing with these 3 passes. It's kind of famous up there. And then he told me that she said to him, I can't support you doing that because you're too old. And I went, I never thought suddenly my age that I couldn't do that anymore, even though I met people up there who were older and who did it, but she runs very safe trips, so she didn't want to suddenly get him into a situation where he gets really sick and, you know, something like that. So I thought that was cute. That, so again, are you if you have a habit that you're continually setting yourself up for failure, that's a pattern to look at, because that will contribute to depression. That's a pattern to kind of get real with myself of, you know, I wonder why I keep doing that. You know, and it could be past karma from a past life. I just had a habit. So let's look at it. I can change it. I can change it. And working with, okay, here I go again. I'm going to do it again. So I can't do that thing because that's not going to work. I need to find a realistic solution of what I'm going to do, how I'm going to apply my life, what kind of work I'm going to find. Make sense? You can do that? You can do that. I know you can. His Holiness Lim Rinpoche would say, you can do. He would do. Okay, a couple more things, and then I'll take some questions. So if you correct what's not realistic, like I realize I'm setting myself up for something, an unrealistic expectation, and depression, so you have to analyze these thoughts. You know, I never do anything right, no one cares about me. And if you're truthful, you find out they're not correct at all. You really have to make the time to look at them. Wouldn't you like to change the recording? So you yourself could devise some words, some phrases. Every time I'm not good enough gets activated, I'm okay, I'm good enough. You know, I'm good enough. What if I just take the not out? I'm okay, I'm good enough. Nobody cares about me? You can make a little list of who cares about you. And you see, then you don't need those thoughts anymore. After a while, they get boring. And that's a really good sign of renunciation, when you get bored with that stuff. It's like, God, I don't need that anymore. It's garbage. Slowly, but it takes time. So you're trying to replace the thoughts, active replacement, the thoughts with some positive thing. When you're chronically depressed, it can be hard. So I have a friend that was working with, I mentioned this before, she has an image. When she notices the beginning of the depression starting, and it could take her into weeks and months, and she notices these triggers, she visualizes herself in a room full of puppy dogs. Because when you say puppy dogs, and I've even seen people with puppy dogs, we have some kind of conditioning. So for women, often when you see puppy dogs, they get down and they're like, ah! You know, and some guys do, like, people have this thing about puppy dogs. So for her it works, that was her image, and it lifts her up, it makes her just kind of cuts. So you can have thought replacement like that, thought interruption. Like for me, you could say a mantra suddenly. I realize, oh, I'm in these trashy thoughts, Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme. And while I say, oh, Mani Padme Hum, it brings me back to the Buddha of compassion instead of my garbage thoughts, letting them go on. I'm like, we're going to go over here. You have to try. It's hard. Sometimes it's really hard. And so when it's really hard and you can't do it that day, and you're lying in your bed, wallowing around, doing your thing, you know, it's like, then just let that go and say, you know, right now I just need to do this to take care of myself. This is as good as I can do right now. Rather than more of, I'm not good, I'm not doing anything. Sometimes you just need to hunker down and say, tomorrow's a new day. So tomorrow I'll see what's on the horizon. Part of this part where no one cares about, nobody likes me, is can we work on cultivating acceptance, love, and compassion for ourselves. Self-compassion. Really, really important. Self-compassion. It's not about that you're self-cherishing as an egomaniac. Self-compassion, a reasonable condition that, wow, I'm feeling kind of depressed right now, I have this condition, whatever mental imbalance you have or you've been diagnosed with, or physical illness, and right now I need to rest, or right now I need to not go to the party, or I need need to go to the party. You know, I need to go out to do this thing, or I need to stay in, or whatever you're doing, to cultivate that first for yourself, a gentle, wonderful expression like that. You can also, with depression, sometimes consciously bring to mind and feel joyful about the things you have going for you. Your good qualities. Again, this is my morning thing of Precious Human Rebirth. My morning meditation of 2 minutes of gratitude about my precious life and my good qualities. It can be 2 minutes. So can you bring that to mind and make that a little bit more familiar in your mind? If you're not sure what your good qualities are, it might be time to start writing them down. And if you're not sure and I don't even know you, and you can come up to me and ask me, and I bet I can think of 3 things right away that's good about you. So it's definitely there. The fact that you're alive, the fact that you can walk, that you can see, that you can talk to somebody, that you have a functioning body and mind, because maybe not everybody here has that. So think about that. It's amazing. The fact that you've got yourself in this room. Fantastic. Great thing to do tonight. The other thing is if you have serious depression, anxiety, sometimes it's not shifting, can you bring to mind other people that suffer worse from it? And other people that are on the planet suffering a lot more than we're suffering. Somebody always has it worse than us. Even, if we think somebody always has it worse than us. And then some people that know Tonglen meditation can do Tonglen meditation, taking their suffering, letting it dissolve, your self-cherishing, offering them your happiness. Let's see if there's anything else. So, and one last thing, and I'll take some questions from Rinpoche. This could go on for a weekend, but there's lots of things you can read, and Rinpoche is saying, if your depression comes without reason, sometimes we're like, why am I depressed? Like my friend doesn't know what originally caused it, and it just happens at certain times of the day, morning or evening, and it's not dependent on something specific, okay? If you can get a deeper perspective on it, that it could be, this is purifying. Yeah, that you're just purifying something from past lives, purifying something from past lives, or if it's coming at the same time of the day, then notice what's going on in your surroundings at that time of the day. For instance, there's a lot of people, you don't have it as much in Florida, but the people that live with less light in the winter, that in Northern Hemisphere, people get affected by that as well. So some people take a remedy of getting one of those lamps in their houses, putting around their houses that is like sunlight. So they just feel, I just had these friends that moved to Sweden, so one of them was talking about, it's dark here. And I'm like, yep, it's winter, Sweden. But then I said, then you're gonna have the summer when it's gonna be light. But some people have to do things like that, where you notice, and I was noticing at one point in my life, when I hung out with these people, and then we were in the bar drinking, and this is before I was into the Dharma as much, and I just wasn't that happy doing that after a while. Like I did it because it used to be fun, but after a while, I kind of was like, and I go home and I'd kind of be depressed, and what did I do? Or I'd be drunk or something, and so it just wasn't serving me anymore. So change the behavior, change the habit. I didn't have to say to my friends, I don't want to be with you anymore. I just diverted our activities, and so some of them I'm like, do you want to do a yoga class? And do you want to go for a walk in the park? These things, so that they were still in my life, but I explained to some of them when I felt comfortable that I just wasn't having as much fun going out drinking. So I lessened the time I did that with them. So again, you can be reasonable like that. And I remember once, Rinpoche mentions this here, so when your partner leaves you, you become depressed. Or let's say your partner dies, but let's say when your partner leaves you, and this happened in a Dharma community of 2 friends of mine, married 23 years with 3 kids, and he just told her that he wasn't in love with her anymore, his wife, and that he was having an affair with somebody else, and it was a real mess for a while, right? So you'd think like a Buddhist would, but people are human. People experience desire and like this. So she was flattened. She was really, for 6 months, just, and they divorced and whatever. And she went to Rinpoche, and she was just a mess. And Rinpoche's like, what did you expect? This is samsara. Like he just chalked it up. It's like he's like, this is a suffering realm. And then he said to her, because that didn't really solve it for her. It didn't quite work. And then he said, but you've done this to him before, in another life. He said you did this to him, so it's just coming back to you that, and that was easier for her. That was easier for her. Then she was like, okay. She realized, yep, she had an understanding of karma, and so it made it a bit easier for her, realizing she was just purifying something, and that stuff has to be finished. If it's in there, it comes out at some point. She didn't blame herself, and she wasn't angry, but it was easier, more easily palatable for her, she was saying. I remember that. And this is one last thing I'll mention, Rinpoche's made, the secret of your life's happiness, the key to being happy, the key to stop depression, to stop undesirable, unpleasant things, unhappiness, unpleasant appearances, unpleasant sounds, and to experience happiness, to feel good, to have pleasant appearances and sounds, all depends on your mind labeling things as positive. It all comes from the mind. It all comes from the mind. An example of this, and many of you know these kinds of things, it's your attitude. There was a film that came out some years ago, 10 years ago. What the bleep do we know? Some people see it was filmed in Portland, Oregon. It's well worth watching. It's even worth watching now with streaming because the film is so fast and is packed with so many concepts that I should watch it again, because it was just like, and, each thing I was watching with friends. I think in Dharamsala we saw it once, and each of us was like, oh, wait, let's make a note of that. Like, we need to talk about that after. But then there was the next concept and the next concept, and so about your attitude. And you've known people that, I know people that have cancer, and they're being treated, and the cancer recurred or whatever, and they're just bright and positive, and they're like, well, we're just going to do the chemo again, and then I know people that cut their arm, and it's World War III, like, or somebody that has a cold, and they have to bring everybody down with them in the cold. It's like the end, like the world is ending, right? So it's your attitude, isn't it? You can make something positive out of anything. You can still be happy and positive. It really depends on the mind, and we get hooked by things, and the mind starts perpetuating a pattern. That's all that's going on. Questions? Yes?
You know what I'd like to think of? Impermanence. So whenever something is really bothering me, I just say, this is not going to last forever. It's going to change, and it always does. It seems
Yeah.
like, if I say to myself, it's going to pass, this too will pass, and then I don't worry so much in the present moment about what's happening, because I know one day it will change. It just seems
Yeah, impermanence is great to think about. And that's why death and impermanence is also puts it in perspective. You're worried about something, you're worried about something, you're worried about something. What if you were actively dying right now? Would you be worried about this thing? Usually not. Right? So better to get our minds prepared for that, for death, because death's happening. Death is definitely coming. Whether we have money or not doesn't matter. Like those kind of worries, it's like, but death is we're definitely going to go through that. So is my mind ready? Is my mind ready? Like that. So that kind of puts things in perspective, I find. And then even on a more practical level, this was in a workshop I was in once, was so you notice you're a worrier and you have things you worry about, and you've got something, and isn't it interesting how when you finish one worry and that's all sorted, another one replaces it immediately. It's another for chronic worriers. And sometimes I think it's from karma. So my nephew, for instance, as a child was a worrier, and he still is. He's a bit better now. But he had it from a kid, so why would he worry as a kid? It must have been past lives. He came in with worrying. And so one of the things in this workshop was if you notice you're worrying a lot, then why don't you schedule time for your worry? Put it in your calendar, okay? Put it in your phone. And the reason is that worry pops up through the week and it interferes with other stuff. But you're not quite giving it your full attention because I'm at work now, or we're having dinner, or we're doing this other thing. So make time and say Thursday at 4 o'clock. And put it on there. Thursday at 4 o'clock, I've scheduled an hour to worry, right? And then, or I've scheduled an hour for this worry. I need, like you were saying, worried about money, so my money worry, okay, Thursday at 4. Got it. Thursday at 4 comes, but you're not particularly worried about the money. You realize it doesn't, and it just deflates. It's like, I don't need to worry, I'm not worried about it now. I don't need to think about it, but at least, so that way if it comes up during the week, you don't spend any mental energy. You go, nope, Thursday at 4, I'm gonna get to it then, so then it more easily goes, and Thursday at 4, I don't really need, there's nothing there to think about. Certainly not worried about it now. So sometimes that helps people.
During many years, I've gone through bouts of 3 months of depression, and the depression turns to anger. And sometimes in my mind, it comes up, it's not that I'm okay with it, because it's not a comfortable feeling. And in our culture, if I would show up and people ask, how are you feeling? I'm the type of person said, well, I've been a little bit depressed. And I'll go, well, but you're a Buddhist, and, or, well, but you don't look depressed, things like that. And sometimes when I go home, I feel that in my head, I don't talk to myself, but I go, oh, if you were in my shoes, let's see how positive you would be 24, like the whole New York comes out of me. And that tip, what you were saying from Rinpoche, 20 years ago, he talked about, how to use that, and Tonglen and things like that. And it is getting better.
Mm-hmm.
And it is becoming really shifting.
Great.
But my question is that I think that, and then certain things, medications for some with them change, like those are side effects. And
So what's your question?
the question is, if you stay, because you asked before, how do people feel when they're depressed? I mean, I could tell you what I do to get out of it.
Or what are the stories that tell
Right.
you, that run
So I don't know if somebody asks me how I feel, if they come over, and then they just, I'd say honestly, and then they just completely, well, you shouldn't be depressed. I don't have an answer. Or, well, you practice Buddhism, but you're not working yet. I don't have an answer.
Yeah, but that's just, first of all, Buddhists are human beings.
Right.
You can tell them, we're not Buddhists. If you're a Buddhist, you may not be a Buddha.
Right.
So that means you're flawed. You make mistakes, you get depressed, you have different emotions. And that's the human situation. So if you're not a Buddha, you're going to experience delusion and imbalances in the mind, and that's just normal.
So is that what I would say to the other person?
That's what I would say, because I've had that at centers, your cook smoking cigarettes, somebody came up to me. I mean, this is before cigarettes were seen, Rinpoche sees them as an intoxicant at the
Right.
center, and we had a smoking area designated, but somebody came up, they needed to talk to me, it was very important, I have to talk to the director. Very serious issue, and I was like, please, I come in the office, your cook smoking cigarettes. And I was like,
Yeah.
I said, he smokes cigarettes, and they said, he's a Buddhist, and I'm like, yeah, I know, Buddhists smoke cigarettes, how about that? Buddhists eat meat, Buddhists get angry, including Buddhist nuns. So, it's just, people put us on pedestals, they don't, we're trying like everybody else.
Well, they put
So-
themselves on pedestals. They put themselves on pedestals, that's why they do that to other people.
who puts themselves on
The
pedestals?
people that tell you, oh, Buddhists should be.
Yeah,
should
people,
be,
exactly, they
should
put you
be."
on a pedestal and they think, so that would be the one thing, and people also get uncomfortable, if somebody says I'm depressed, or people get uncomfortable with it, so you shouldn't be depressed.
Yeah.
It's not a should thing, it's like, this is how I feel right now. So that's just people's, people just,
Bad thing.
they just feel uncomfortable with other people's samsara and other people's experiences of that. That's, a lot of people are like that, yeah.
Good evening. When it comes to this particular subject, being a veteran, I've had to work through a lot of anger and, anxiety and all that. And I often ask myself, what is upset, not who? Because if I ask who, then all the associative things that belongs to who goes along with it. So I say what, and then that brings me back to his bones, the skin, the hair, the stink, and that kind of helps me.
Yes, and it's kind of related to emptiness meditation, which is really the basis for really ripping out the root of all your suffering, all the anxiety, all the depression, all the other delusions. And you're kind of analyzing, and you can't really find this thing that's really depressed, or this being that's really depressed when you're really analyzing like that. That can be really helpful. Yeah. Yes.
I feel like there's a difference between certain emotions like sadness and happiness, where those convey like healthier emotions, whereas like to me depression is like a phase where I can have these extended periods of depressions where I'm just like I won't be able to operate the way I wouldn't be able to I wouldn't be able to I wouldn't be tidy, I wouldn't be able to take care of myself as well, and it's like being able to, and you don't want to like cozy up to it and get comfortable with it, but but recognize it and like heal that.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it's great to acknowledge it, like to realize, wow, they go on longer in their phases, and they're,
They're actors.
Acting.
Yeah, they're
Acting
actors.
studio.
oh, are
Yes.
they? Oh, that's cool.
It's an acting class.
Okay, let's,
Hopefully it's
the,
pleasant.
I hope so.
is to know, fantastic to acknowledge and be aware and just realize, okay, I'm in one of the phases right now. So gentleness to yourself, a lot of gentleness to yourself. And we all have various like physiological imbalances, and sometimes it'll trip up the thing. So acknowledging kind of like, oh yeah, I'm in this phase right now, and I need to make sure I've got everything set
But
to
also
support me.
being able to like face that, because I personally have a tendency where I'm having a hard time to avoid the situation, and I'll put myself in a better situation where I can be happier.
Mhm.
But then I have to go back to the place, I have to go home, and then like I have to deal with the situation at some point.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
have to
but-
deal with my problems.
But that's also about dealing with your problems, like kind of
Exactly.
facing up, facing the, what's going on, what can I do about it that's reasonable? Am I doing it? And if I'm not doing it, how come I'm not doing it sometimes? Like, is it getting in the way? Can I get more help to get me to do it? And sometimes we need more help, and that's okay, to ask other people for help. Because, chronic depression and things can be quite serious, and people that suffer from bipolar condition and other things that go on, and it can be quite serious. So you want to get proper support. And one other thing I wanted to say about depression is if you know people depressed, or you yourself, and you are having suicidal tendencies, or you know people that seriously are, please do intervene or get help yourself. Like we were trained also in hospice work was, if somebody seems to be headed in that direction, specifically ask them, especially if you're close enough to them, or have you ever thought about suicide? If you hear them talking over and over how depressed they are, and they said it's better to directly ask people, do you have any suicidal thoughts, or have you thought about hurting yourself at all? And if somebody doesn't even have a method, or, because some people will say, well, I've thought about it, and they say ask if they have a method, because if they have a method, they're serious about it, and they need help right away. Some people are like, no, I don't know, I'm not there, I wouldn't even know what to do. Then it's less serious. But if somebody is really going down that hill, and then they're like, yeah, I got a gun, or you need to get them help right away. Don't hesitate. Don't think it's gonna go away, and get help, or if you yourself are feeling that, please let people know around you. Please let people know, and you can get help, and you can solve it. You can sort it where you're not feeling that way anymore. It's really important. Suicide's not an answer. It's not a good answer like that. So thanks. So it's good to know that, and you will sort it, and things do change like that. So still be patient too. Like that. Yeah.
So how do the Buddhists feel about suicide? I mean, I know the Catholic or
It's-
the Christian religion, it's against God's will, you know.
Yeah, it's seen as a negative action because you're harming someone, so it goes against the basic Buddhist premise. The challenge is it's not a really full-on completed killing karma, because to have that, you have to designate the person you're going to kill, and they have to die before you do. So in suicide, you die at the same time. So it has a different karmic result, but it's really heavy, and it's really negative, and suicides tend to commit suicide again and again and again, sometimes like that. So
Well,
it's
your
really
mind
good
would
to
be
try to
too.
talk somebody out of that, and it cuts a really jagged, slash through everybody around you that loves you and things like that.
The mind, when it went into, death, would be completely horrendously, obscured, messed up? I mean, a suicidal
Oh, when it
mind,
dies,
right?
it's suicide.
So-
It really depends on the motivation.
Right.
Depends on the motivation. So there are people that kill themselves out of anger to get back at people, and there's people that kill themselves to get out of people's way, and they're really ill, and they feel like they do it out of thinking of the others. So it's a very different outcome. If you're doing it out of a lot of anger to get back at people, I don't think it's a good result. And if you're doing it out of thinking of others, like things like that. I mean, even though your mind is mixed up, I think it has a different result.
So like assisted suicide, and if you had a really bad illness and you went through like in Washington State or in Oregon,
Yeah.
Just so you don't burden people, or you
Yes, so
yourself don't
Buddhists,
wanna suffer.
Buddhists wouldn't very little participate in that, in assisted suicide. So the main thing we would do is if we get really ill, this is kind of our track, if you're a Buddhist and you have a guru that you trust and have faith in, you would consult with them, and you could consult with them earlier for treatment. Like, should I do chemotherapy? Should I have the surgery? If you have faith. And then in the end, you could consult with them. So for instance, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, if you feel like he has clairvoyance to know the person's mind, there was a man about 40 dying of colon cancer in the hospital, and he was still conscious, and the family there, and it was a matter of, he was questioning, should I go on life support? At the end, he was asking, and should he have various things to support it? And Rinpoche somehow said to keep him alive as long as possible, even if he was in a coma. So Rinpoche must have seen something that he felt better he's in this life, wearing out, even if it goes on for months. And then there was another man in his late 70s, had a massive heart attack. The kids were all Buddhists, and then Rinpoche, he was on life support, and Rinpoche said it was okay to take him off the life support and just get the family together there, take him off. He lived another 24 hours. So it varies based on the person, but we wouldn't participate in somebody taking their life. So I couldn't get the medicine for people, I wouldn't administer it. I could be there with them if they want to do it, but I wouldn't participate in it. And I was asked once with an AIDS patient about, he wanted to know, in the end he didn't want to suffer, and he said, he's like, I just want to know if you can, would you be there, can you get me the medicine? And I said, I was a new Buddhist at the time, it was a counseling thing, and so I said, I'm happy to be here with you, but I can't get the medicine or administer it for you. And he was fine, it was just clear, like, I can't do that, and he said, I respect that. And so I said, if you want to have somebody else, I'll happy to sit here with you the whole time. And so we probably wouldn't participate in that, yeah, as a Buddhist. We don't euthanize our animals, Buddhists. It's hard. It's hard. I'll put it this way, we try not to euthanize our animals if we can, but it can be really hard, like hanging out with the animal in the end. And I've done the sleeping pills for them, and painkillers, and try to stay. It's hard, but some people then choose, like in the very end, to take the animal. But they say if it can finish out the suffering, the short amount of suffering it would go through at that point, whether it's a day or a few weeks, may be better to let them finish that animal rebirth like that, and then like that. But we do the best we can, and it's a personal decision what you feel to be involved in. It's a very personal decision. But that would just be the Buddhist belief, like that, what you try to do. Like that. We're not into the animal suffering, but you can make them more comfortable the way we would do with people, like that, to let them finish out. Anything else? But is this helpful for people for just dealing with anxiety and depression? Again, this is a short evening, I know, but I hope it's lent a little insight or that some clarity for people. And I want to thank you very, very much for coming. And I'll put these. So I also have, if you're interested, I have some Mani pills from. I'll explain what they are. I think I've run out of cards. Oh, I think I'm out of cards. Okay. Anyway, amymiller.com, and the center has the email address too. There are some teachings on the website, and it's connected to a YouTube channel if you want to just see, and they're all categorized by topic, so it could be easy if you want things on meditation or death and dying. If you're interested in the pilgrimage, there's an email there. I have Mani pills from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and what they are is they're herbal pills. They don't interfere with other medicine, and they're little tiny pills. That's okay, you can just leave it. And you can, I can give you a few. You just either put them under your tongue right now if you want, and they dissolve on their own and just swallow them. And you can think that they're from the Buddha of Compassion, from His Holiness. And if you'd like, you don't need to take, if you want, if you have a little tissue and you want to take a couple, you can keep one for later, like that. So you can, if you want to come up, I'm happy to give you some Mani pills. Oh, and I wanted to say one other thing. Is I wanted to mention the Tutankhamun Center that I've been coming here for about 11, 12 years, and I wish I could come more. I don't seem to come very often, and but at least I think every year. And I've seen the center go through a lot of different changes and things, and it just is really wonderful to see it thriving, and to meet many new people, and to see some of my old friends come back. So I just want to make a distinction of the center just doesn't operate without people being involved. It's really your center. You know, it's all of our centers. So I can't express with all the centers I've been involved in, and then some that I ran, how you have a place that's safe and comfortable and clean, and you come here to work with your mind. You have problems, and you come and you show up, and it's as much as you want to put into it, you're going to get out of it. But this place is here, and it's here due to the hard work and dedication of a number of people. So centers always need help. If it's something where you have a couple hours a month or a few hours a week, there's many things they can do, and it's also really helpful financially to support these centers. Because you come in and you go, well, this looks great, but you have no idea what goes on behind and how strapped centers are. And so anytime we could become a member, for instance, a member is different than fundraising, because a member is a consistent flow of revenue into the center that they can budget on. Where fundraising, it's like, well, there's this project, and somebody gave 100, and somebody gave 1,000, but you can't always budget on that a little bit as well as when you have, like, I'm a member, you know, and I joined, and so then they know, like, okay, we've got this many members. So it's something to think about. They have a membership program here, and then when something more special happens or a teacher comes, some people say, I'd like to offer the food for the teacher. How much is that? I mean, 3 days I'm here. I never really get to eat all the wonderful things they buy me, right? But there's food that needs to be provided, and you could be like, I'd like to sponsor, you know, I'd like to give $40 toward the food. Like, it's fantastic, and it's just that much the center can count on. But the thing is, all those acts of generosity are powerful for you, because it's generosity that creates your prosperity. And Westerners don't know this. My Asian sisters and brothers get it, and they're emptying their pockets, and generosity is the cause of your wealth. That's where it comes from. You know, so we kind of feel like, no, I don't have much money, and you tighten up, and it's exactly the opposite. And I've done it with one center in Vermont. When I got there, we were so poor. Actually, the same happened in California. We had no money, very little money. And you say, as a center, we can't make any donations. So you make small donations. And we insisted several times we made little donations to things. We did an offering practice that also helps with prosperity. And we never looked back. The money was just pouring in, like that. I think when I left, they had $150,000 in the bank. And they had nothing before. It was, you know, it wasn't, so it's possible. You yourself said it's good for you. But our culture, it's always charity begins at home. That's how I was taught. So it was very hard initially, but I just wanted to mention that because it's such a worthwhile place. And, you know, I just think it's fantastic. If you enjoy coming here, you'd like to continue to come, and there's just many ways you can help. So sorry to give my fundraising thing, but I think it's really important. So please consider if you can be a member, you want to support somehow, something like that. So thank you very much.
Thank
So I'd like to dedicate, when we finish, I'd like to take whatever energy we created that's positive, and I think we did create some positive energy, to, may we invest that in our future enlightenment. May that happen swiftly, okay? So because there's so many beings suffering, and this way we'll be unlimited in how we can help all of them, like that. And for all the people on the planet that do suffer from depression and anxiety, may they be released to that soon and lead very meaningful lives and be happy. Let's turn to page 235, and we'll read these 3 verses. So if you need a book, feel free to look on, or we can pass the book back to somebody. Page 235. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. May that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, I too dedicate all these merits in the best way that I may follow their perfect example. And the long life prayers for our teachers on page 244 for His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Page 244. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers honoring the 3 jewels, may with myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Venerable Amy, so much.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you to Nicole and all the people involved with Thupten Kunga Center. Thank you so much. That's a lovely looking kata. Look at that. I've never seen this one before. Please stay in touch. So
Thank you all for coming too, and if anyone would like to offer a kata, please do so now. And we also have katas too, if you want to buy one or just borrow one.
And if you want some of these, you can come up and I'll give you some of my leaflets.
And next Monday night, join us for Meditation 101 with Jackie Keeley. If you've taken it before, join us for a refresher or start it next Monday night. And then Dr. Lauren Ladner will be here in a week and a half for Friday evening and Saturday, talking about the healing power of compassion, and Saturday, cultivating joy. So just
have a look at our newsletters or the flyers outside, and thank you so much. And thank you, Venerable Amy, who
Thank you.
may be back this summer for a week or so,
I
okay?
hope so, and so after this, I am down in Miami. If you're interested, there's a group, they can put you in touch if you want to come down. I also have these blessing strings from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, blessed by him. So if you're interested, they are things you wear around your neck. Generally, it's a blessing, it's like protection. But if you think you would take it and keep it and wear it, feel free, and if not, no need, like that. Like that, so you can come up and, they're knotted in a certain way, special like that.
Appreciate it. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much. Thank you for coming. Absolutely, sure.